What's going on, guys? Today I have a new format for reviewing movies today. We've missed a few movies like that have kind of come out at similar times, and today we're just gonna hit on them quickly, efficiently. I'm not gonna go too in depth because these movies, some of them have been out for a while, and I'm trying to just get the opinions out there and, hopefully, one day we can discuss this a little bit more in depth if need be. First movie that I want to get started with talking about here is a movie that debuted on Disney Plus. It originally was going to be in theaters, but they shifted it to going to Disney Plus, and that is Turning Red. And it is the story of Malin, who is a 13-year-old girl who is kind of discovering life in a way. She's kind of in that weird, like, puberty-like stage of her life, so she's trying to find her own identity. But in doing so, she also turns into a giant red panda when her emotions get the best of her. This movie is pretty good. This isn't terrible. I mean, compared to, like, other Disney animated and Pixar style movies, this isn't, like, highest on the lists that they have. I mean, they have such a deep catalog at this point that it's not easy to top certain ones, but this is definitely a good movie. I do like the themes that they introduce in this movie with the struggles that kids, and actually they explore it a little bit with adults too, the approval of parents, the weight of being good enough for, like, your parents' vision of who you are. And I think that's something that's very important to explore in movies, and albeit it is in a Disney fashion with magic and stuff like that, so it is, obviously a different take on it, but nevertheless, I think the messaging in this movie, and I think the characterization of all these characters are fleshed out very well. Malin has a group of friends that stick by her side no matter what, and that is great to see. And then her parents, one is a little bit more lax than the other one, and the other one is very strict, and people can relate to that. And I think overall this movie just knows what it's doing in its messaging for the most part. Now, I do have issues as far as, like, its ending goes. I don't think the ending sticks as hard as it could have. I think the ending kind of it feels formulaic in the way of, like, Disney is doing it because you expect Disney to kind of do that, whereas, like, I would have preferred something else with it. But nevertheless, I think it is a really good movie. I think its messaging is great, and it's definitely worth a watch. I'm going to give Turning Red 3.5 stars. Now, this one is going to be a little interesting to talk about. I feel like it's a little bit controversial in a way, and I feel like it's not, like, I don't know, I don't feel like it hit a lot of people's radar, and if it did, I feel like there's mixed emotions on it, especially for me as well. X, and it is the story of a group of adult filmmakers who end up going to an older person's house. They are allowed to use the house that's off to the side of the main home to film an adult film, and in doing so, scares and bloody gore happens, and it is interesting. Now, I've looked around on reviews for this movie because I was like, I kind of want to get the feedback on this one, because leaving the theater, leaving this movie, I felt uneasy in a way of, like, I really don't know how I feel about this right now, because there's aspects of this movie that I really liked, and then there's aspects that kind of were hung out to dry almost. Like, there wasn't things in this movie that I was completely satisfied with. Now, what I will say as a big positive of this movie is I think the cast does a really great job in this. Mia Goth as the lead in this is very talented. She is very good. I think that she brings a very confident character out in this story, and I feel like that was kind of necessary in this one. And then I also thought that Brittany Snow, who is an adult film actress in this movie, who primarily does, like, most of the scenes, I believe, in this movie, it's a different take for her, obviously. When I looked at her and I was like, I saw her in the trailer, I was like, oh, it's the girl from Pitch Perfect. But she quickly kind of fades out of that almost, like, she does have a lot of interesting things to do in this movie. She kind of, like, steps out of the shadow of those types of movies a bit, which was really fun to see. I thought Jenna Ortega was really good in this movie as well, and then the person who kind of brings them all together, kind of almost like the producer in a way of this like adult film, was pretty good. I thought that the older couple that they use in this movie for the older house, I thought that they were very creepy, and I thought maybe a little out of left field sort of at times for them, but they didn't bring out a bad performance. My main issue with this movie is at times it feels a little unfocused, at least for me. Maybe I'm kind of missing the boat on this one, I don't really know. I've seen a lot of people give it high praise, and I think it's fine. I don't think it's like a 5 out of 5 type movie, though. I think it is kind of like okay at a lot of things. Like, I think that the scares are relatively good for the most part. I thought that the movie is shot extremely well. I mean, A24 can, if there's one thing you can watch an A24 movie and just know going in, is that it's just going to look amazing. Like the camera shots, the imagery in that sense, like the lighting, all that sort of stuff, just to get like the shot in the movie is always going to be really good to watch. But again, I will say the story at times feels a little unfocused for me. I thought coming out of the movie, generally what my thoughts were is that if this is a satire, I think they hit a lot of the marks that they should. But if they're going for serious tones, I don't think they necessarily hit it all the time. And there are some interesting themes that I wish that they would have explored just a little bit more. There is a group discussion between all the people that are a part of the film that is being made, and two of them in being the director and then Jenna Ortega, who is the kind of like the boom mic person, who is helping make the film technically. They kind of have an in-depth discussion after they're done filming it about why they do these things and is it morally right and all this sort of stuff. And I thought that they could have really leaned into that stuff more. I think that is an intriguing sort of plot to kind of explore. And they kind of only hinted at it. They've only like kind of messed around with it slightly. I wish they would have gone a little bit more in depth. But otherwise, I think the movie looks really good and is acted really well. And there is plenty of gore. I think the kills in this movie are well done for sure. There are some out of left field moments, obviously, in the plot as well. So in the end, it doesn't really always tie a neat bow in this movie. But I think it is okay overall. I'm going to give X 3 stars. Now let's get into the final movie on this list that I have. It's a Netflix movie. It is a movie that I don't envy. It is a movie that, quite frankly, it broke me when I watched it. Quite honestly, it broke me. Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2022 is a film that was released on Netflix. This movie takes place 50 years after the events of the original movie back in like 74 or something like that. And it tells the story of a bunch of social media influencers that go to this abandoned town in Texas and they try to liven it up and make it hip and, you know, square and just all sorts of modernized stuff. But in doing so, they run into problems with the legendary killer Leatherface. This movie is dog shit. Now, we've already dealt with a bad movie recently with Morbius, and that movie is really bad. It has got awful structure and a lot of things, and its acting is not great. This movie makes Morbius look like it's a goddamn masterpiece. This is honestly, and I'm not like trying to be hyperbolic in any way, this is the worst movie, new movie I've seen since Separation. Put that in perspective. This movie's plot is very odd. It makes zero sense at times. The characters, and albeit a lot of people will say that the characters should be annoying to an extent because you want to go and watch slasher movies for the killer to go and kill them. And I do agree with that sense. You probably do want a couple of characters to be very annoying and to be wanted to, you know, chainsawed in half and whatnot. However, not everybody needs that, and I feel like almost everybody outside of maybe one character was, like, redeemable. Like, all the characters annoyed me. All of the nuances that they introduced in this movie were really, really terrible. There is just awkward, like, sort of dialogue that is being used. Like, one character is making fun of another dude that pulls up in a gas station and talks about his truck and is like making fun of like his dick size while she's like 2 feet away from him. Like, the idea that this would ever happen is just, it breaks my mind in so many ways. And not to mention, like, this movie is very short and it could have been even shorter. This movie is like an hour and 23 minutes and the credits start rolling at an hour and 15, and it could have been shorter, which means that this movie just brings nothing. Like, it's just like a very quick series of events that doesn't mean anything, and then you, like, they try to get you invested with some background for characters and it's not used correctly. I think that there's some aspects that they could have tried to use but then they don't. I thought the build of suspense for certain, like, killings and all this other stuff in this movie with Leatherface is fine, but like not used to its best ability. I thought the editing was like really bad in a lot of parts, especially towards the end of the movie, and the bus scene for sure is horrible. And it's fine if you want to go watch this movie for the kills, because the kills, I will say, gory for sure. I think you're going to get a kick out of them if you're in it for that. But I would also say that the movie is gory just to be gory. There is no sense to it. Like, there is, like, when Saw first came out, it was grotesque, sort of. Not in the first one more so, but later on. And they kind of built off of the first one, like, with its, you know, show very little and use the imagery in your head to kind of fill in the blanks. And I like that stuff. This is just full-blown, you see people being sawed in half and people being lifted up in the air with a chainsaw and just kind of, like, ripped open to shreds. It's terrible. It's so, like, formulaic, like, on a Hollywood standpoint. Like, I just don't understand why they pushed this movie out on Netflix. And quite honestly, I could go on for days on how bad this movie really is, and maybe it did really deserve its own review in a sense, to where I could really spoil all the things I could. But in the end, this movie is just horrible. This movie is the worst movie I've seen in a pretty long time, actually, now that I think about it. And man, I was like laughing at this movie. I was just like laughing at it because it's so bad, but then also confused and frustrated in other parts. And that made for a completely horrible time. And I don't wish this on my worst enemy. And quite honestly, I'm kind of done talking about it now. I wish I'd never seen it, to be honest with you. Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a dud. It sucks. It's not good. Don't waste your time with this movie. Completely just wipe this off the list. I mean, if you want to laugh, sure, but you will not be satisfied. In the end, you will be depressed. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. I do just wanted to get all those movies out and reviewed in some capacity whatsoever, just so I at least had something to leave on the platform. If you liked, please leave a like. If you want to subscribe, please do. It helps me out a lot. Share around with friends, and I will talk to you all next time.